Good afternoon. I'm Don Keelan. This is The Truth of the Matter, and I'm here today with the Honorable Phil Scott, Governor of the state of Vermont. Governor, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me on, Don. Honorable, we'll figure that out as we go along. We'll see what you think at the end.
No, you are the Honorable. It's not my first time meeting with the Governor. He was here, I believe, 2 years ago, just before he took office, so welcome back.
Yeah, well, thanks. Great to be back here in the region.
We have a number of areas we want to cover this morning, this afternoon, and let us begin. And how about we talk about the state of the economy and what's your opinion of the Vermont economy as of the moment?
I mean, we have good news and bad news, right? I think that in some respects, the national economy is doing better. Vermont is doing better. We've managed our taxes a bit over the last 2 or 3 years, and we've seen an uptick in the economy as a result, I believe. The other side of the equation is workforce and people, and so we have some challenges along the way. We need more people here in Vermont. Our population is stagnant, about 625,000, and it's been that way for a number of years, as you probably know. And we enjoy the lowest unemployment rate in the country right now, 2.1%. There are many governors who would tout that as a sign of success. But from my standpoint, it only tells half the story, because what we need is more people. We have jobs open throughout the state that go unfilled because we don't have the people here to fill them. So we have workforce challenges, we have population challenges. We need to be more attractive for people to come to our state. And we need to tell a different story than we've been telling in the past.
At one point, you had established a goal, I believe, to go up to 700,000 in 10 years.
Yeah.
How is that goal?
It's still essential if we want to grow, because as you probably remember, on my first day in office, I signed an executive order outlining the strategic goals of my administration, and to grow the economy, make Vermont more affordable, and protect the most vulnerable. And those three simple principles guide us in every decision we make on a daily basis. In order to take advantage of this thriving economy, this growing economy, and really focusing on that, we need people to be there so that we can fulfill the workforce and fulfill the jobs we have. So we aren't making many gains in that area. That's why we're really focused on workforce development and trying to attract more people to the state.
Are you alone in this? And I don't say that facetiously, but the thing is, you don't get the impression that when the legislature's in session for 4 months, that they have the same high priority for this critical thing about filling not only jobs, but getting young people here. Because when you bring it to a local session, we have the Mac company in Arlington. Yeah. They're desperately looking for people. And not only Mac, but many of the other companies down here. Then you can transfer that to the local fire agencies and rescue squads. They're looking for volunteers. And they, we went from, I think, 25 down to 6 in Arlington. And some areas are even worse than we are. And so, I mean, it seems like you're carrying this. The priority has not been transferred to the other.
Right.
Am I wrong in that? I mean,
well, I don't think you're entirely wrong. I think there are many who share some of my concerns, but I think it's growing. I think there's a realization, and I saw some gains over, especially in the last legislative session, where Democrats and Republicans alike are starting to understand this is a real issue for us. And you brought up like the volunteer firefighters. When I go to a lot of different events throughout the state. We're indebted to the volunteer firefighters. I don't know what we'd do without them, but we may soon find out. if we don't fix the problem that we have. The demographics are what are killing us in some respects, because what we see when you go to a firefighters meeting, for instance, look around the room. It tells the whole story. Aging group of people, dedicated, but we don't have the youth that we're bringing in. And again, what we're seeing in everything is in, it used to be the brain drain. People said, well, we're not going to be able to keep our kids here. There's more opportunity outside the state. They want to leave. There's no opportunity in Vermont. And they're going elsewhere. So that's why we're losing our youth. Well, the truth of the matter is we've lost the crop of kids. When you have 30,000, and the statistics are real, 30,000 fewer students than we did 20 years ago. And that number continues to drop on a daily basis by about 3. So we lose about 1,000 students every single year. So for over the last 20 years, 30,000 fewer. That means we don't have as many people here, right? So they're not coming through our education. We don't have them to leave even. And so it has a ripple effect, not only with the workforce, but look at our state colleges. Look at how challenged we are there. 90% of the students that go to our state colleges are from Vermont. So once you have fewer kids coming into the system and fewer kids going through our high schools, there's fewer kids going to our state colleges too. So it just gets worse. It's a snowball effect.
Another aspect of the problem is housing. We're finding down here in this part of the state that I'm sure what I've read about Burlington, that's very expensive and it's very costly to get rentals up there and so forth. But down here we just don't have the housing to bring in employees if we had them. And we're finding, like, for example, in Arlington, we have about 1,100 people work in Arlington. It's a village of 2,300. We're finding so many of them come in from out of state every day. And we would like to have them in our community to pay taxes, to have their kids in our school.
That's exactly why we need more people here.
But the thing is, I'll give you I don't know if you heard this from your staff. I heard this from the Orvis company. They have their headquarters just south, right here in Sutherland. Right. They have 250 employees. Only 8 live in Arlington. Wouldn't it be lovely to have 80 of them live in Arlington so we can not be having a problem with our school, losing population, and so forth. So will you continue to have this as a priority?
Absolutely. It's part of our mission. When you talk to our youth, those who are graduating from our colleges and universities, for instance, it might be from other states. First of all, we have to change the story. We have to tell a different story, because in the past it was, again, not much opportunity in Vermont, not many jobs here, and many who graduated from our universities and colleges would move on and go back to other states to make a living and have a career. Well, it's changed now. We have more opportunity, more jobs than ever. In fact, when you think about our unemployment rate, 2.1%, and again, you look at our job link, in our labor department, it tells how many jobs we actually have, right? Mm-hmm. So we have 8,500 jobs listed right now. 8,500 jobs. Those on unemployment right now, about 3,000 to 3,500. Tells you a lot about the problem that we have. Does. So, and that's why we need to invest more in our downtowns. It just came from Bennington in the Putnam block. It was a great collaboration of many different players to make this happen. And it was tenuous at best. The funding is tenuous. Everything was tenuous. I mean, it was just a very difficult project to move forward with. Everyone had the same goal. But it was, again, the funding sources, coming up with enough tax credits and so forth to make the project work was very difficult. And 2 years ago, when I came into office, the Bennington Development Corp came to see me and said, we're at a standstill. We don't think this is going to happen. And I asked our I brought in our secretaries and commissioners and everyone and said, look, we need to make this happen. We have to figure this out.
I understand it's the most complex financing in the country.
Incredibly
17 different
complex.
agencies, and but you're right about there's a tremendous cooperation among.
But it shows what you can do when you're pulling in the same direction, right? So federal resources, state resources, local resources, private resources. This is an example of what you can do when you have the same goals. It has nothing to do with politics. It has everything to do with cooperation and trying to work together. And I give great credit to everyone involved in this one, because it should have been dead 2 years ago, but everyone pulled together and made it happen and didn't give up. And today, groundbreaking. I've never seen this many people at a groundbreaking in my entire career in politics. It was full. There was a waiting line to get in, and it was a tent, a large tent. So, again, people from all walks of life coming together. So we need to focus, and there's housing involved in that project as well, in the downtown.
Yes, there is.
So we're finding more millennials want to be in the downtowns. They don't necessarily want to drive everywhere. They want to be part of the community. They want to live where they work. And so you're exactly right. Whether it's Arlington or Bennington or Rutland or Springfield or St. Johnsbury, we need more housing. And so there's opportunity. Because 2 years ago, we had that $37 million housing bond that I pushed forward with. The legislature cooperated with me on that, and we passed it. It's leveraging another $65 million in private assets to make it the single largest investment in housing Vermont has ever seen. So it's going to take a little bit. I mean, we're having some groundbreakings and so forth, and not many ribbon cuttings with that as a result of that money, but that'll come. So our kids, those who are graduating, want a job, they want a career, they want an opportunity, and they want decent, affordable housing. And so this money, this bonding that we put forth is, I want them to focus on workforce housing. That's what we need. We need people that work every single day. We need them to have housing and be able to afford it. And I think that we'll see the benefits of that bond, and we may have to go further in the future.
There was another bond that got turned down this year. I think the Secretary of Treasury.
Yeah, it was right.
For $35 million, and that didn't go forward.
Yeah, and here a couple of reasons why. We're at the outer limits of our bonding limits, so we got downgraded by Moody's this year. Just a bit. I mean, we're still in good shape. Like what they see, not every state has the rating that we have, a good rating.
And what the governor means by that, I can tell the audience, by being downgraded, is we can have a higher interest rate because of our rating, and the higher interest rate over 30 years on a $35 million bond can be pretty costly.
It's like a bank. The riskier you are, the higher the interest rate, right?
Okay.
So it's the same thing here. We're a little bit more of a risk than we were maybe 5 years ago, or in their eyes, and they've used different accounting practices to get there. So, but we have to accept what they say. We're all in the same boat in some respects as other states. So, what they're concerned about, what they pointed to, is our demographics, and our underfunded liabilities.
I was just going to ask you that.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, is the unfunded debt for the pension plans and any other liabilities, is that a drag on our economy?
Absolutely, because, and here's why. They aren't unfunded, they're underfunded, or have been in the past. This started decades ago, and didn't keep up. The government didn't keep up with what the promises. So it didn't fund the pensions to the level that they were needed. So Governor Douglas, in his wisdom, in 2007, I believe, said we need to get a handle on this, and we need to put a plan forward and work with the legislature in order to do it. I was in the legislature at the time, and came up with a plan to take care of this over a 30-year period. Well, it's a bit of a steep curve. We're having to put more money in year after year after year. Well over $100 million towards this underfunded liability. to catch up. So we're not going to catch up. We're not going to fulfill our debt and get on an even keel until 2038. So we have a ways to go.
Yeah,
but,
sure do.
But it's like a mortgage. Think about it in terms of a mortgage, although it's steepening. As we get to a point in the next 2 or 3 years, we'll level off. Our payments will level off. But every time, so our economy's good. 2 years ago, no taxes, no fees. I had a bit of a struggle with the legislature over this concept of not, I thought Vermonters had enough, didn't need to raise taxes and fees. We accomplished our mission. We did not raise a single tax or fee. As a result, the economy does better. We actually had a surplus last year. Had another surplus this year, like almost $60 million this year. That's the first time we've had anything on the bottom line for over a decade. So good news, right? Well, we have to use that money to backfill our underfunded liability. So we've used a lot of that money for that purpose, which is good because we have to take care of our debt, take care of our obligations. But at the same time, we're not able to reduce the affordability for Vermonters because we're using that money up.
Are you still going to continue your goal of keeping taxes with no changes? I know you've taken a lot of heat on that from the legislature, not to raise taxes. And the other one I want to ask you in connection with that, it's not only the unfunded debt that you were mentioning, but we also have a liability, do we not, to clean up Lake Champlain? And that's going to be require a substantial amount of funding.
Two couples, they're all related, but our waterway, Lake Champlain in particular, cleanup was something that's mandated by the EPA. The feds are making us do it. So the treasurer came up with a plan, said we needed X number of dollars every single year to commit.
It's about $25 million, right?
Yeah, maybe a little bit more. But we were able to do that. We finally came to agreement last year, took a portion, dedicated a portion of the rooms and meals towards that. Didn't raise the rooms and meals. Took a portion of what we had already there because I believe that we could live within our means. We had enough tax capacity. We should be able to do that, especially when we were having a surplus on the bottom line. So I said, let's use an existing resource in order to do it. I had said the estate tax first, but they came up with a different plan and went to the rooms and meals, which is I'm okay with it as long as we didn't raise it. So we have a plan. We've agreed. We're moving forward. In fact, I'm going to have a press conference on this tomorrow to just highlight the fact that we're on this together, and we've figured out a way to accomplish this because it's important that we take care of our resources. So we've done that. As far as I just believe I've lived it my entire life personally. I lived it in my businesses. I just live within my means. I mean, you have to ask yourself at times, do you need it or you just want it?
Yeah.
And there's a big difference between the two. And sometimes, I have to ask myself the same thing. Do I want or need that new motorcycle, right? And it's usually just a want, not a need.
Let me just move over to the area of education for a minute or so, because I think there's a tie-in with you mentioned earlier the young people not here, and the 30,000 that we've lost, and we're still seeing that. We're seeing it down here in this part of the state, a decline in students.
Every county sees a decline.
Do you see more merging? And your goal is to keep this school tax rate as stable as we can, and so far you've done that. Do you see, or what do you see that's different than where we are right now? And I know there's been a lot of consolidations and merging, and I want to mention to you something about Arlington and about that in a minute, but go ahead.
It's difficult to find ourselves in this situation. Again, we have fewer kids than we had 20 years ago. We're educating about like 73,000 students right now, as opposed to 103,000 at one time. So we have an infrastructure in place that can accommodate over 100,000 kids, and We only have 73,000. So we need to do a couple things. First, need more families coming in. That would be helpful because that will help our workforce, help with our revenue, help all across the board in trying to drive the economy a little bit more. But as well, we have to do things differently. I think we have to have the courage to think outside the box. I'm a firm believer in early care and learning. I'm a contractor by trade, and I know a good foundation is essential to any project. If you don't have a good foundation, you can build the Taj Mahal, and if you don't have it on a good foundation, the Taj Mahal will fail. So it's the same with our kids. Make the investment in early care and learning. Make sure they get a good foundation to start with, and we'll see the benefits. They'll see the benefits in years to come, in the outer years. So let's focus on a cradle to career type of concept. We spend $1.7 billion for education right now. Single largest expenditure of state dollars that we have by far. You think about it in this term. We have a budget. I'm going to round numbers. Don't hold me to exactly the numbers, but they're pretty close. Let's just say our overall budget's about $6 billion. Overall, that's federal and state revenue sources. So about $6 billion we spend every single year. Let's say about half of that are state dollars, half of that's federal dollars. The 1.7, so $3 billion of state dollars, let's say, 1.7 billion of state dollars is in education. Think about that when we're arguing, debating about our road infrastructure and so forth. Just transportation dwarfs. I mean, the education dwarfs transportation in a lot of respects.
Going back to your point about running a business, any business that would have lost 100, and I'm going to use the analogy of customers instead of kids. You go from 103,000 customers, and now you're down to 73,000 kids or customers. I mean, you make adjustments in your business. Are we facing rules that the education department has set up over the years that those rules are preventing us from making the adjustments that we need?
I don't think we can just blame it on the rules. I think it's just part of who we are as well. We like local control, right? We want to be in control of our own schools and our own communities. And you're very protective of that. There's a bit of nostalgia at the same time. I grew up in Barrie. I'm, very proud of my high school, where I came from, who I am. And if they told me we had to shut that down and merge with Montpelier, let's say, I'm not sure that I'd be all that supportive of that. And I think we're feeling the same thing throughout the state in many respects. We haven't kept up, really, with what we're seeing.
Well, Governor, I got to say, and that's a good point you make. You almost fed me the question here. Going from Barrie to Montpelier, Arlington was asked by, not asked, was mandated by the board, the state board, to merge its supervisory union with Bennington. We would prefer to go to Manchester, Taconic Green. Bennington doesn't really want us, nor for the most part does Taconic Green, but that's where Arlington would like to go. Arlington's chairman of the school board and the vice chair, one works for the Orvis Company, the other one's a state trooper, worked late into the night back in November to put together their findings as to why they would like to go, why we'd like to go to Manchester. The next day after work, they drove to Montpelier, met before the board, and I know this is maybe a little bit out of your control, but they were told, you got 4 minutes to make your pitch, and then step down. 4 of the members of the board were from, had a vested interest in Manchester. Probably should have recused themselves. But the point is, if we're looking for civility and we're looking for respect, we're looking for these are young people who volunteered their time to do this. I find that so un-Vermont, to be honest with you. To be told well, you know what the drive is. You're going to be driving back there now shortly. But the thing is, it's 2.5 hours from here to get up to Montpelier, and this is at night after work to go before that meeting. And I can see there's a lot of anguish building up among some school districts. I mean, obviously they filed suits, but I mean, is this something you would expect?
You know how I feel about the respect and civility.
Yeah,
And
I know you do.
I'm very.
I want to call it out to you, by the way.
Yeah, I'm very wary of anyone who takes the time, whether it's the legislative process or in this case to the Ed Board. And by the way, for those that don't know, because it's I wouldn't expect everyone to understand, the Ed Board, Education Board, is independent of the administration. I don't control the Education Board. They adopt their own set of standards, and they're their own unique board. And we have a Secretary of Education that goes to all the Ed Board meetings, but has no control over the Ed Board.
Do you appoint the board?
When their terms come up, a portion of them, not all of them, just a portion of them. So I've made a few appointments already to the board. I think one or two from the Manchester area. Oliver Olson's another one. So I've made some appointments over the last 2.5 years. But it's the same with the Act 250 boards and so forth. I mean, I make some appointments, but I don't necessarily control them in a lot of respects. And that's both has its advantages and disadvantages. So I would say that someone should be given all the opportunity they need to make their case.
I would hope so. I hope that's not the way people are coming all the way up to Montpelier, regardless of where they come from.
Yeah, it's certainly not the way I think we should do business, and that's why I've done this tour, or taken my cabinet out on the road, Capital for a Day, I call it, where I go to every county, bring the whole cabinet, and we have a cabinet meeting in the morning. And then we split up, and we go and actually go out to see the people, so that the expectation isn't for them to, every time they have a problem, just to come to Montpelier and tell us and make your grievance known. I think we should go out and see both the attributes of what we have to offer, but also the challenges and try and address those. And I'm not saying that we can fix all of them, but we can listen. And I think listening is half the battle, and that's why we went through. We did the 14 counties in the first couple of years. We started over, had one last week at Windsor County. We went there and learned a lot. Again, this is the second round through Windsor County. We learned a lot again about what we need to do, and some of the challenges we face.
We've staying with education and challenges. At the college level, we've lost 3 colleges in this area over the last 4 or 5 months, and that brings it to 4 now in the state if you put in Burlington College. And from what you see, are we at risk of losing more of these smaller colleges? Well, and what can the state do to prevent this from happening? Is it merging? Is it? I know it's. The administration and the legislature, they're criticized for not giving as much to our colleges as other states might have.
Yeah, keep in mind the ones who have closed, and they're
not state. I know that.
Yeah, they're not state entities. These are independent, private institutions, and it's unfortunate that we've lost them, because it's like losing a business. In many cases, like in Boltney, that is the community. That's the major employer in the area, and for them to close is going to have a detrimental effect on the economy in that town. So I'm very wary of that. But it comes down to their customers. They didn't have enough students to make it work, and so they're feeling the same effects we are, although they can't just raise taxes in order to satisfy their budgets. Whereas in what's happened, like with education and the K through 12 in our state, when we haven't been paying, I don't believe, enough attention to what we should be doing. And when we see a reduction in the number of customers or students, what's happened is, the rates have just gone up. We just brought in increased taxes, which is borne on property tax owners. So that's where all the money comes from. I didn't finish that before, but all the money, the 1.7 billion, the majority of that is from property taxes. So that goes up. It just increases the burden on those Vermonters who are struggling to get by as well.
But getting back
connected.
And you're right. The colleges are private, but just like a private company, if the state knew a company was going to close, they would step in and see what can we do.
And we have obviously have done that. What can we do? We can't just give them money to survive because it doesn't fix the problem. They have a lack of customers.
They have a lack of customers, and I got to mention to you, having studied for them, there was a huge, the commonality, in addition to the students, an enormous amount of debt.
Yeah.
These colleges went into tremendous debt several years ago without really seeing a way forward on how to handle that debt service.
I will say, you have to reflect on your business plan. As well. And I'm not saying that there was anything they could do. I haven't studied it enough, but I have witnessed another great institution in Vermont that had to make some changes, and that was Norwich University. Norwich University had a second campus, had Vermont College, and they were together. And about 30 years ago, they weren't doing so well. They changed their business model. They did away with the campus in Montpelier, the Vermont College campus. They did away with that. They consolidated into to Northfield. They let more civilian students in. They went online education. They went into cybersecurity. There's all kinds of things they did, and now they're healthier than ever.
Yeah.
They are incredible. They're
And
I don't think the population has been student population has been greater than it is today.
At Norwich.
At Norwich.
Yeah. And something from that we just said has been done now by Marlborough College, which is down here in southern Vermont. They're merging with the University of Bridgeport, which is an engineering school with a lot of STEM work, and they're liberal arts with a lot of nonprofit work at this college. So they got something in common. But maybe that's the way to go. And maybe,
well, I think every institution has to really reflect, look in the mirror, and do some soul searching as to what it is they need to do to attract more customers. So the state colleges are going through the same thing, and we are obligated to the state colleges. So we are working with them to do whatever we can to make sure that we give the product first that our kids deserve. But make sure that they're financially viable.
Well, Castleton has done a great job in coming down here now and taking up the slack of the nursing school that was closed when Southern Vermont College was closed.
Right. We have
and that's another area where
we're lacking nurses in this state, just like every other sector.
Yeah.
We have a need. So I'll give a great credit to our Chancellor, Jeb Spalding, who is doing this soul searching as we speak.
Let me again move on. I'd love to stay on some of these topics, but we got
to move on.
Got to move on because I got to get you back home. Policing, and I really want to refer to the crisis that you inherited, the opiate crisis. Are we winning in that now from where it had been? If you want to use,
I'm not sure that I would use the term winning, but I would use the term maybe stabilizing. I give a lot of credit to the former Governor Shumlin, for identifying the problem, and we've continued with the work that they started and enhanced that. We opened up another treatment facility in St. Albans, which took a lot of the burden off from Chittenden County. When I came into office, there was hundreds waiting for treatment. And when someone is ready for treatment, you better have an opportunity for them to receive it because you might lose them in a couple different ways. So we we wanted to do that. Now there's virtually no waiting time in Chittenden County and in other parts of the state as well, although we have pockets where we need to do better. But the reality is we have a hub and spoke model where we've addressed this crisis in a way that other states are replicating. We're a model for many. I testified, I went down with my HS secretary, and we met Congressman Welch there, but I testified in front of one of the committees in Congress about this. And again, their questions were great. They wanted to learn. I couldn't tell a Republican from a Democrat, and we're all in this together because it affects all of us.
Well, when I read that there are 7,000 in treatment, and the majority of them are young adults, wouldn't that be wonderful if we can get them through treatment back outside?
Treatment, recovery, and then they'll be in recovery.
In recovery.
Right.
And then to help fill this issue where companies could use young people.
Yeah.
I mean,
There's 4 legs of the stool.
Mm-hmm.
There's prevention. Make sure let's do all we can, right, to make sure that that someone doesn't become succumb to this dreadful disease, right? So that's one leg of the stool. Treatment is the other, getting the help for those who need treatment to get on a path forward. And then recovery, because it's long term. It's not instantaneous. It's not just another drug you can take to stop. It's just a long-term effort. And sometimes there'll be opportunities when people slip back. So we want to be there for them in recovery, provide them with some opportunity, a job and so forth, and a place to live so they can get on some sort of path to back to normal. But the other leg of the stool is enforcement as well. We need to continue to be diligent on enforcing the laws we have and making sure that those who prey on those who are affected are brought to justice.
And yet you still, you're right, and you still see, unfortunately, some large heroin busts coming in. Or not heroin so much, but...
heroin has been some busts throughout. So again, just a steady effort on all 4 legs of the stool are what we need. We're not going to arrest our way out of this, but we're not going to treat our way out of this either. We need a balance of all 4 legs of the stool.
I want to mention, in light of the tragedy that happened this weekend in Toledo and El Paso, that your legislation that you got through last year, I think it was last year, it seems to be now looking forward to be adopted by many other governors, and that is having a waiting period for gun control, owning guns. Background checks.
Background checks and red flag laws basically are the 2 areas that some governors are looking at now, which we
and of course we raised it to 21.
We did.
And it's interesting, you took a lot of flack for that.
I still do.
We'll get into that in a while. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it, but one thing that's puzzled me is the issue of racism that's come into policing, not so much policing, but we hear so much about in Vermont now. And not only in Vermont, but I guess all over. 10 years ago, I didn't seem to hear much about that racism was an issue. Yeah. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I mean, so why is it now all of a sudden it's
I think a couple of things. One, let's be honest about this. We're one of the whitest states in the country right now, so we probably just weren't aware in some respects. I believe that we need more immigration into the state. We need more families here. We need more diversity. We need to learn from one another. And so when we see more people visiting and coming to our state, we have to be aware that racism exists in our state. And maybe because you and I don't feel the effects of that because of our skin color, doesn't mean that it doesn't exist and other people aren't feeling it. Maybe they weren't as vocal as they are today. But until we walk in someone else's shoes and feel what they see or feel what they feel, and see what they see and hear what they hear, I'm not sure that we can be judges on whether it's appropriate or not. But I'm sensitive to, after hearing some of the stories and seeing and talking with many people. I don't think I was aware as how they
Maybe
were.
that's what
I just don't think we were as aware. But I think we need to be more aware, and we have to be more sensitive to how people feel, and again, what they're hearing, what they're seeing, what people are doing to them. We need to. The good news is, I think racism is learned behavior. It's not part of our DNA. It's not the part of how our chemical makeup. It's what we learn, and so we can do better, and we should do better.
I mean, I grew up in an era, and I served in the service in an era when we were 3 hours in front of the president going to Camp David. The 24 of us, 24 Marines, on that bus that were going to provide the security at Camp David. The 4 black Marines could not get off the bus in Frederick because the sign was very clear, whites only for us. And all we want to do is go for sandwiches. And then the other part of the assignment on the drill team, we could never go south of Virginia with the 4 blacks because you could not perform in public in the South with a mixed group.
Yeah.
And I saw that.
So you saw it. I mean, maybe I shouldn't have spoken for you.
No.
You probably saw it more aware.
But your point's well taken about. I haven't seen this, and maybe I just wasn't aware of it 10 years ago. And yet you're right about. I didn't think of it with the white estate.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in a neighborhood where there are 15 languages spoken.
Yeah.
And the city was half black, half white. Yeah. So, I mean, maybe I'm just ignoring. And I saw, obviously, the blatant segregation, blatant discrimination. Even when I was with a major CPA firm back in the 60s, you could not bring a black CPA south of Washington to do an audit. Just don't even bother.
I just am seeing more and more that's concerning. I feel like we're going backwards in some respects, and that's concerning to me. We should treat people with respect and civility, regardless of their skin color, regardless of their nationality. And I can't imagine, if I mean, you're a proud Marine. What if all of a sudden you weren't welcome in some area because you're a Marine? I mean, that would hit home with you.
We weren't welcome in Ireland when we were back there in 1945 and to go to school and live there because we supported the British during the war, and they didn't want us back there. So we left.
Well, they probably forgot that we were at odds with the British at one time as well.
That's right. I was going to mention large projects, and you're coming from one this morning. I just think we need this. I've seen this. This is an observation of mine. Large projects in Vermont don't do very well. I mean, in the last few years, I'm thinking of City Place is having difficulty. I'm thinking of the Bio Center up in Newport. I'm thinking of the Hermitage over in Dover, and then of course the number of pieces of the EB5 up in Peak. Was it J Peak or?
Yeah.
Should there be more scrutiny on the part of the state of these large projects? Because,
I think back about the ones you mentioned. I'm not sure that there's a lot in common with them. The EB5 was an issue that maybe there should have been more scrutiny when something is too good to be true. It usually is. But the City Place in Burlington. I'd say there was a lot of scrutiny on that. The local board, the city council, was heavily involved, and there was a lot of oversight. And that I think that project in particular comes down to resources. It's money, it's funding, and we see how difficult it is to put a project together. I mean, we saw it here at Putnam Block. I mean, there's been 2 or 3 years now. And it's finally coming to fruition, but it's taken a lot of creativity and a lot of different entities coming together to do that. So some of these private companies that forge ahead, sometimes things don't work out the way they planned. I mean, we see it all the time. We see it with restaurants. We see it in any private industry. Sometimes, your customers dry up. Look what happened. Look what happened in the tool and die industry in Vermont. I mean, that's part of the collapse of the Windsor County area with Springfield. I mean, heavily invested in the tool and die industry, and all of a sudden the markets open up in foreign areas, the Japan and China and India and so forth, and you saw the effects of that. I think the same thing holds true with other entities too. I don't know. We're doing all we can. I'm not sure that more oversight into a private investment is necessary, as long as we protect the environment and give them a path to moving forward.
Well, on some of these projects, the state is heavily involved, like the Bennington project, the Putnam project.
Yeah.
You're involved. To some degree, the state was involved in Newport. Indirectly, the Burlington College, the state was involved. They provided the financing to Peoples. They provided the tax credit to Peoples on that $6.5 million debt they took on. So a state agency was involved. All I'm saying is, and believe me, I'm not looking for more coverage. I'm just saying the, and I've got 40 years in state development too, and I thought it's just a phenomenon. And then the latest one was this major defalcation over in Dover. So. But
that the one in Dover, I mean,
that's private.
They have money, right? I mean, there's money there, but there's some inner problems with the whole structure.
Well, I get into all the details. They didn't pay the bank.
They have a group of investors that aren't necessarily all working together.
Well, and they didn't come up with the call. There was a call of capital, and they didn't come up with it. And needless to say, the bank didn't get paid, and then it just rippled, and it's huge.
Yeah.
Let me ask you another area that's gotten my attention, and that is there's a lot being said in Vermont. It's almost suffering fatigue now, is climate. And I know you've been a strong supporter of not seeing a carbon tax imposed, but yet there's so much being written and said about this. And I just want to ask you one thing about this. There's a 165-page report put out recently by the Bennington County Regional Planning, which is our county planning group. And one of the goals you've had, I know, in your administration is not to have, or see if we can do with less commissions, less committees, and less reports. I mean, and make the government more efficient. And yet, when I ask for something about energy, I get this 165-page report, and this is going to be sent to the state public utility to get its blessings on it.
The PUC.
Yeah, the PUC.
Which is another independent board, by the way.
I'm not liking this idea of all these independent boards here.
Green Mountain Care Board is independent. The Public Utility Commission is independent. The Education Board is independent. The Liquor Board is independent.
And the Efficiency or the Energy Investment Corporation.
They're
independent.
Right.
And that.
But we like our independence.
I don't want to go there on that one now, but that's going to be the basis of a column this weekend. But the energy company, the energy nonprofit. But do you see, with all the work being done on the state trying to reduce its carbon footprint, that what rules are going to come out to us to make it more difficult to be here? For example, one is they're advocating is that, for example, if you buy an SUV, you're going to probably pay more.
The Cadillac tax.
And then it'll the additional cost that you pay will go to subsidize the increase in getting another part of the population to be able to buy EVs, electric vehicles. Because the goal is to go from 2,900 electric vehicles now to something like 70 or 80,000 by 2025.
Right.
And I'm saying to myself, this area here is flooded with small contractors who have pickups and SUVs to carry out their business.
Yeah.
And
but the good news is, I think I'm very excited about the electric vehicles, and this, I'm a car guy, so and I like I like my traditional.
You don't race with it,
yeah.
right?
No, eventually, yeah.
Oh, okay.
They have Formula E now, which is all electric, and they look like Formula Ones, but they're electric. Incredible torque, and I think simplified. They're actually easier to work on. And less costly. So if we can have something in the future that gives us the performance we want at a reduced cost and become energy independent, why wouldn't we want that? I mean, I think, as Americans, we like to be independent, and I believe having energy independence is part of that as well. Instead of relying on foreign oil for everything, and the price of gas and what happens and.
But Governor, let's be honest. One of the goals of a lot of this carbon is to reduce the Vermont carbon footprint, which has gone up 16% from 2010 to where we are now, and it's supposed to have been going down. Some people attribute that to the closing of Vermont Yankee, but setting that aside, if we're going to impose,
I voted in favor of that. I voted in favor of keeping Vermont Yankee open. By the way. One of 4 senators. We lost.
But the thing, okay, I'm glad to hear that. The point is, okay, so Don Keelan is going to be penalized for having his SUV, if you will, a bit.
Maybe.
Well, possibly, but
be
careful.
Yeah, technology, I think, is going to work in your favor.
But the thing is, how about the people that drive in this state from out of state? Like the 13 million that come here as tourists, 75% probably are driving their SUVs. What happens to them?
Yeah, of course, that's why some people think that we should be charging some sort of more for a fuel tax so that we capture some from them. But my point is, Ford, for instance, coming out with an F-150 that's going to be electric. I see Ford has invested heavily in, I think it's Rivian. I think that's the name of a private entity that's building SUVs and four-wheel drive pickups. Google it sometime and see what they look like, because it's pretty exciting. So Ford's invested in that. So Harley Davidson has come out with a line of electric motorcycles. So things are happening, is what I'm saying. And the sooner we can get there, I think the better off we're going to be. And so 60% of our emissions is transportation related. So the faster again. And I don't think it's going to be a straight trajectory like this. It's the same. I think it's going to be like this. Once we prove ourselves, once batteries get better, longevity, prove four-wheel drives in this climate and lasting longer, it's going to go like this. And the cost comes down. For these vehicles, and the cost to maintain them, I believe, comes down as well. And electricity, the cost of the fuel is less than gasoline.
I have no problem with any of that. Not that I'm here to argue.
No.
But the thing is, how much of it will be mandatory? And that's the point. That's the independence. That goes back to your point about independence. And when you, I just very quickly, there was a point here in this report that said, this is on the lifestyle adaptations from the Bennington County plan. Choices about where to live and how to get from place to place will be critical. These changes will happen incrementally, but people need to begin to thinking about them now, and municipalities should take steps to make it easier to develop and live in higher density mixed-use centers. Now, as a developer, I can tell you from 40 years ago, we've been always advocating higher density cluster development to save energy and so forth, but now, of course, it's coming out. But how much of it will be mandatory, and how much of it, when you're a developer and you go before a planning board now, will they be saying, well, have you looked at using non-fossil fuels?
Yeah.
All I'm saying is this another imposition on developers under Act 250?
I hope not.
I think it's
You know, here's what I would rather see in anything we do. I think we need more carrots and sticks. I think we need more incentives. I think we should have a pathway towards success and adoption and so forth. Because when you mandate something, people get defensive. What we want to do is develop a product that people want, and if they want it, then they'll go willingly. You know, you don't have to force anything. Build the best SUV with electric motor that at a price people can afford, and people will buy them.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's what we need to do, and that's why we're developing in our downtowns. You know, we have empty spaces. We have a lot of infrastructure in our downtowns that needs to be upgraded and re-energized and renovated and so forth. And that's why we're investing in those areas, because we want there to be more people want to be downtowns, and we want to provide them an opportunity to do so, and we have the stock to do it. So same with some of the dilapidated residential stock we see in communities. I put forward a plan to create some tax incentives to do that. And that's what I'm going to, it wasn't adopted by the legislature, but I'm going to try again, because I see in all these communities, we have an area of need. We have dilapidated infrastructure. But what we need to do is create an incentive for people, contractors and individuals, to buy some of these homes, renovate them to a standard that we accept environmentally and so forth, make them cost effective, and then let them flip their homes.
And we're doing that exactly what you're saying. We're doing that now in Arlington. We're working with Ludi Biddle of NeighborWorks, and she did 18 homes in Rutland, and now we're doing 3 in Arlington, using the bonding that you did. And it's a creative portion of the bonding that you came out with last year.
But why pay? Yeah, I mean, some of what we see, and you know, you're a CPA, you get penalized if you flip a home, let's say, capital gains and so forth, when you don't keep them for long enough, right? Mm-hmm. So why wouldn't we create an opportunity for people to buy a few homes, or do something, or a contractor during their downtimes be able to send their crew over to work on a home, and then be able to sell it in the end? I mean, that's the type of thing we need to get creative about, and create some incentives, and give them a product that they can work with and prosper.
Let me take a break here and just tell our audience that I'm with the governor, Phil Scott, and you grew up in Barre, Vermont. Went to school there, and then you went on to the University of Vermont and earned your degree there, and then spent a considerable amount of your time in the construction industry with the family-owned business, and then ultimately you owned it, I gather. And at the same time, you for 10 years you were in the Vermont Senate, and then 6 years as the lieutenant governor.
I know.
And then
hard to believe. Yeah.
And then
this is somebody. I had not a political bone in my body 20 years ago. No interest.
I remember that you were telling me that was some time ago.
Yeah.
And then
some days I still feel that same way. Politics.
And then now you're in your second term as governor, and you commute now from Berlin, Vermont.
Yeah, not very far.
There's no governor's mansion in Vermont, is that right?
No, you know, no, not in the New England. Governors are a little bit different than others around the country. Most governors have a mansion, but not in New England. I don't think Massachusetts or Maine or New Hampshire or Vermont. None of the 4 do.
Did I get that right?
Yeah, Connecticut does, but.
And I should also say happy birthday, right? You had a birthday the other day?
Yeah.
Okay, we won't mention anything beyond that.
Thank you.
We only have a few more minutes left, and one thing I want to ask you, I do want to get into healthcare if we could do that, but you know, I was thinking of you the other day when I was rereading a book by John Kennedy that he wrote in 1956 called Profiles in Courage. And in that book, he talks about Edmund Ross, I believe, who was if you remember, back in the impeachment of President Johnson, he was the vote that was critical to reverse the acquittal. And President Johnson back in 1868 was not found guilty of being impeached then. But he had to make a tough decision against his party. You, in turn, had to make some difficult decisions on marijuana, on abortion, on gun control, and so there's a little bit of Edmund Ross in you, and having to make the decision that you fly against the party. Do you feel that you, you remembered Senator Jefferson, he had to do the same thing. Do you feel you're going to continue as a Republican as you go forward? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I have my core values are, I believe in limited government. I believe in capitalism. I believe that we need more efficiency. Some of the social issues, I'm not probably on the same page as some of the more conservative members of the party. But from my standpoint, focusing on the fundamentals is important. And I try and do things, make decisions based on what I think is right, and be ready and willing to accept the consequences too. And if I make a mistake, I like to raise my hand and say that I've made a mistake. But when I'm faced with a decision, I think about, I have to live with myself. After this is all said and done, you're only as good as your word, your bond, your integrity, your character, and so when I'm all done with the politics, I have to be able to look myself in the mirror and be able to live with myself and look my kids in the eye and tell them I did the best I could, not for political reasons, but for what I thought was right. So I'm more than willing to do that, and if it's not what people want, they have an opportunity to do something different. And I think that that's okay, and that's good, that's healthy, it's part of our democracy.
Well, I should point out that it must be okay because you rank in the top 5 as the most popular governor in Vermont. In polls, in recent polls that have been taken, whether you like polls or don't like polls, but nevertheless, I thought that was interesting.
Well, it's interesting.
I
think right now, when you take in the top 5, I think 3 out of the 5 are from New England and Republican. They're all Republicans, by the way, which is interesting. You can. I'm not sure that I would take all that to the bank. After some of the decisions I made on guns, I slipped way back. So I'm not sure that politics are fickle. And
well, let me add. I should add to those tough decisions you made, or the one was the other one was on changing Columbus the day. So. But then, when I see politicians making those kinds of decisions, I always go back to Edmund Ross and what he had to do, wondering how would I react. But let me have one more question for you, because I know I want to get you going. You got a long drive back, and that is, if you had the luxury of only working on one problem every day as governor, what would that one issue be?
I think it would have to be the demographics that we face, because if we can fix that problem, it solves a number of other ones. Because if we don't fix the demographics and the economy and the workforce all tied together, then we're not going to have the resources to do everything else we want to do.
So why don't you then? That's where we began. The interview on that very issue, and I was wondering what you were going to say as the thing you would work on. Why isn't it then every agency, everyone who's got anything to do that can help with this, starts marching to that and get behind you on that? I mean, why do I get a 165-page report?
Well, those aren't my folks, but anyhow.
Well, I mean, I know.
But again, that's why the executive order was for my cabinet, my agencies, my departments, my team. Grow the economy, make Vermont more affordable, protect the most vulnerable. Those are the 3 initiatives. Those are the 3 guidelines that I want them to ask themselves what they're doing. Does it accomplish any one of the 3? And if it doesn't, maybe a good idea, but you might want to put it on the back burner for now and focus on prioritize, because we all have to prioritize in life. Want and need, prioritize, and try and take care of the issues at hand. And it's easy to get sidetracked. I can assure you that. And again, go through your own life and your own daily routines, and it's easy to get sidetracked and take your eye off from what's really important. But that's why I wanted to have a simplified set of guidelines that people could look back to, and my team take a look at, my leaders, and say, are we doing what we need to do to fix Vermont? And I'd say if you adhere to those, then you'll accomplish that. And I remind them that almost every single week.
Well, I'm glad you do, because it seems like it just goes every area you're looking at. And we talked a little bit about healthcare and nursing. We just don't have enough. And 5 of our hospitals reported to the Green Mountain Care Board that they're losing money.
Yeah.
And part of it is they're hiring nurses or travelers, which are twice the cost. So.
Again, government's a little different. Yeah. I'm not the king. I'm just I'm one branch of government, and we run the agencies. But we have a board of directors that also has input. It's called the legislature, 180 board members that have some influence on what we do as well. So I can talk about all the things I want to accomplish, and I can continue to focus on those. But I have to have a willing board of directors to work with me. Otherwise, we get sidetracked.
Well, the facetious side of me tells me that, on the climate thing, if we don't start getting people to live in this state, and we keep going, if this population keeps going down, we don't have to worry about the emissions. There won't be people here. But I know I got to get you going. You talk about the boards. Here's my recent book.
Oh, thank you.
I'd like to give that to you. It's on how to be a board member in Vermont. And I've done a lot of work with nonprofits throughout the state. And I thought maybe a little guidebook could be helpful.
Well, thank you. And so you understand, the board of directors.
But you are the benevolent dictator, in my opinion.
I may be the CEO.
Okay. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.